Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim R. Today is episode 101. We're going to be interviewing Courtney and Josh S. How you folks doing this morning?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Glad to hear. So we're doing a couples interview today. So for you guys, did you always use together, or do you guys have like two separate stories of how it began?
I think that we each individually kind of started out on our own journey to addiction, but when we got very heavily into drugs and alcohol, it was something that we did together.
Gotcha.
just as normal as a date night or
it was a great feedback loop, because anytime I had any urges or cravings to use, I could always bounce it off my partner, who was also just as rational as I was, and was like, yeah, let's do it.
I like that, just as rational as you.
Yeah. So I think we were both addicts in our own way when we met, and when we got together. I think addiction just found a place to burrow itself. So
that's a good way to put it. Yeah. So real quick, just to give us a little backstory, let's start with you, Courtney. Tell us a little bit about growing up and stuff. How is that? Did you have any type of things that might have led into your addiction?
Yeah, I mean, my mom had me in high school. I was the product of a teen pregnancy. My father did not want anything to do with having a baby. He was still in high school himself. Actually, the night that I was born, apparently my father was at a concert with another woman who he ended up getting pregnant, and then I inevitably have a brother from that relationship. So my mom was a kid herself, so my grandparents kind of had stepped in and raised me as much as they could. But once my mom got pregnant again 2 years later with my brother, and then another 2 years later, my other brother, it was almost like she resented us, I guess, that we had stolen her childhood or her early 20s, and the time where you would normally be going to college or experiencing life, or going to the bars with your friends and everything. So as we got a little bit older, it was just like boyfriend after boyfriend, man after man. It was just this revolving door of all these men in and out of the house. And I remember my grandparents had said that they came over to the home one time, and I was 6, and then my other two brothers were 4 and 2, and my grandparents have told me that we were all like either in our underwear, diapers. One of my brothers was up on the cabinet. I'm 6 years old trying to make them breakfast or lunch. I don't recall what time of day it was. And then my youngest brother, who was 2, was eating like macaroni and cheese in a pan from like the day before, like just out of there. So my grandparents had just they scooped me up and had taken me, and I've had conversations with them, and they've said that was their biggest regret, that they only took me and not my 2 brothers, but they had just felt so inclined to do that because I'm a little girl in the home with all these, men that are just coming in and out, strangers. My mother was drinking and just constantly intoxicated and partying and everything. So they had kept me. Then once they had taken me, my mom didn't like fight, to get me back or anything like that. And it was years, probably until I was probably 4 years later, when I was 10. She I hadn't heard from her, like didn't call me on birthdays, nothing, like would never see my mom. And she lived like 10, 15 minutes maybe up the road. So as I got a little bit older, I'd say probably around the age of 10 is when she came back into my life. But later on, I realized that was because, she didn't want me to move back in with her because, she loved me or she missed me or wanted to reconnect and, try to have that mother-daughter relationship. It was because she felt like I was old enough at that time to be a free babysitter for my brothers. So I naively, thinking that my mother wanted to develop this relationship, was of course excited. I'm a child craving, that attention. So I moved back in, and it wasn't long until she was out all the time. I mean, she justified it by, well, I'm a single mom and I work these long hours, so it's okay for me to never be home or to be at the bar drinking or bringing these men into the home that are strangers. And as I got older, it just kept, getting more and more where she was never there. I mean, I was, getting my brothers up for school and making them breakfast and doing their homework with them and bringing them back from school and making sure they had dinner and just all those things that my mom should have been doing, I was doing. So I had to grow up really quickly. There was instances where, I remember I was 13 and she was going to a Whitesnake concert with her and her girlfriend, and somehow they had dragged me along to it. And I remember being down in the mosh pit area and just people are passing joints around. And I mean, it was just absolutely insane. And I'm just here in the middle of it. And her friend had gotten so intoxicated that they made me at 13 drive them home. And we were probably a good hour away from the house.
Wow.
Yeah. So
had you ever driven a car before? Like short distances? Wow.
No. I mean, I think I had ridden on or drove a lawnmower, but not that justifies a vehicle. So yeah, it was just a very dysfunctional home. And as when I was around 15, 16, then she wanted to be around me more, but that was because she was giving me alcohol and she had a drinking buddy and somebody, to do all those things with. And then, I was the greatest daughter in the world and she loved me so much. And
so at 16, she started drinking with you?
Yeah.
Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah. So we would, I remember there was this bar right at the end of the road we lived on, and she would bring me up there and, we would just party and drink. And, I thought that was acceptable. I thought that's what daughters did with their mothers, because I didn't have anything to base that, that off of what a mother should look like. So yeah, it was, it was pretty wild, but that's kind of a brief overview, I guess you could say, of kind of how my childhood went.
So what about you, buddy? How was your childhood growing up?
So I grew up in Florida in the late 80s, early 90s, single family, mom and a dad and me, middle class. My dad was a Vietnam vet. And I later on learned that he was bipolar. He had some drug and alcohol issues. And so the problems with my father, that's where all my stuff comes from, right? Everything's traced back to my dad. So growing up, everything was fine till I want to say about 5 years old, And then the sexual abuse started from my father. I learned from about 6 to going to say about 10 or 11, that the only way I could get my father's love and attention was to be pliable when he wanted to abuse me. Right. So when I say that, I mean, like my father, he never hugged me. He never held my hand. He never kissed me. He never told me he was proud of me. And these aren't exactly, like, he never communicated any of that, not one time. And we never had conversations. I never sat down and spoke with my father like I'm talking to you right now. He refused to speak. He refused to speak to me flat out. So the only attention, verbal, physical, anything at all, was during abuse behind closed doors. And like, Courtney just said, I had no other story or belief system to bounce that off of. So I thought that's what fathers and sons did. And that abuse became, it almost became like, this is the only time where my dad loves me and shows me attention. So something that was extremely painful, I was trying at the same time, I was trying to accept it, even though my brain wouldn't, my body wouldn't. My brain would try to disassociate and escape to some other, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids, idea of another planet, because whatever's happening to me is horrible. At the same time, I was like, well, my dad showed me love and he spoke to me, so I probably need to accept this because this is the only time I'm going to get attention. And my mom had no idea. She had to work. She was out working because my dad refused to get a job. He was a draftsman at one time down in Tampa where we lived, and he drew up blueprints for the city. And at some point he just stopped working. And he just stayed home and he did drugs all day long. And he stayed in his room. The interesting part about him was birthdays, Christmas, any time where you would expect a family to get together, my father would never come out of his room. So my mom would be present, right? So for instance, take a Christmas morning. My mom and I would be opening up Christmas presents. And about 8 feet away would be my parents' bedroom door. And he'd be in there, drunk, high, whatever the case may be. And he wouldn't come out. He just would not come out. And he did this for the first 13 years of my life. He just didn't show up. And it's funny because I was in an AA meeting probably about a couple months ago. And my sponsor is about the same age as my father, right? And so when I got into this meeting, I saw a bunch of men my father's age communicating in ways I'd never seen men communicate, period. And it just absolutely blew me away. And I remember at the very end, we stood up and we did the Lord's Prayer and we all held hands, right? And I remember as soon as my sponsor grabbed my hand and I held his hand, I immediately started getting emotional. And I started crying. I started weeping because I immediately got transferred to being a 5-year-old boy. And I remember telling him afterwards, I said, that was the first time I'd ever held a grown man's hand and felt loved. I mean, it was like inner child stuff, like almost immediately.
What a shitty thing to feel.
Right. Yeah. Right. It was super shitty. I mean, I was glad I was feeling it, but since I've gotten into sobriety and I've talked to my mom a lot about this, and I've done a lot of work. I've come to realize my father was jealous, right? He was jealous of me. The idea of having a kid was great. But as soon as I was born, from talking to my mother, he immediately separated. He wanted nothing to do with me.
What did he feel like you guys were both fighting for mom's attention?
Yeah. I was winning out. I was winning out hands down. And I think in my early age, she made it very clear to him that was what was going to happen. That was what was going to take place. And he could either accept it or move on. And I think mentally he moved on until he physically moved on when I was 13. But so this guy, so one of the problems I have as an adult is during my addiction, of course, I manipulated, stole, sold everything I could get my hands on to feed the addiction. But one of the things I was really, really good at in a horrible way was manipulation. I always knew and had a desired outcome to every conversation I had with any human being I came across in contact with. And my dad taught me that. He taught me at a very young age that lying to women, lying to my mother, lying to somebody, it works and manipulates. So what he did was he lied about, he would make checks. He would literally make these checks. I don't know where he got them, but he had these checks probably from a previous work. And what he would do is he would make those to where they would look like a job he had just told my mom he had. So say he was working at some gas station. He would hand her this check and be like, here's my check. He would dress up in a uniform from that place. Like somehow he'd finagle a shirt from, say, Speedway gas station. And he'd have that. And he would literally go away and come back like 10 minutes after my mom would get home, and he'd hand her a check for the week. And they never cleared. They always bounced. But he always kept this lie going with her for years. And I don't know how she didn't know. Maybe she just, I don't know, maybe love turned into pity. Maybe she did know, felt sorry for him. But where I come into it is he made me a part of his lie, right? So he explained to me, and this is probably one of the only conversations I ever had with him, is after some abuse took place, he explained to me that this is what he was going to do to my mom. This is what was going to take place. And I had no choice but to take part in it. And so I never had agreements with my father. So anytime he abused me, there was a gun that he always had his gun on the dresser. It was always within eyes view. And then there's me. Yeah, I think so, because initially I wasn't sure, but then when it came to times where him and I had disagreements, say he'd be coming home from the gas station and I'd be riding my bike and he'd pull up next to me and he'd point a gun at me and be like, you know where I'm coming from. Don't say a word to your mom. He put guns in my mouth on numerous occasions to shut up about the abuse.
That must have been terrifying.
It was. He threatened to kill me. He just, I don't know. I forgave him a while back, but when my mom put him on a bus when I was 13 years old and was like, basically beat it, get out, you're a piece of hang. And I haven't seen him since. Right. So I'm 30, I'll be 39 this year. So I haven't heard his voice. I haven't seen him. Like he died that day to me. And I tried to work in step 9. I wanted to go back and try and find him. Right. And be like, hey, you were an addict. I'm an addict. Try to, just honestly, I just wanted to sit down and talk to him. Like, what were you thinking? Right. Like abusing a small boy and putting guns in their mouths. Like what was the thought process there? But yeah, so 13, my mom, here's the really interesting part. About 2 years elapsed after my dad left, where it was just me and my mom. And then she met somebody, and I could see she started to experience joy. She started to experience happiness and hope and strength. And she just became a totally different woman. And so she ended up getting remarried, and they ended up having a child that's 15, my sister, who's 15 years younger than me. And I was happy for them. But what that looked like was they had this beautiful little nuclear family now that was moving forward emotionally, physically, and in life. And I felt like I was being left behind, like I wasn't a part of this family. And I had so much trauma and grief to process. I had no idea how to process it. And so they were moving forward. I wasn't. It turned into a lot of problems. And I started using drugs at 12 on a daily basis, about 12, 13. I started with acid because it was,
You started with acid.
I started with acid. Yeah. So Southwest Florida. Yeah, it was Southwest Florida. So I grew up in Fort Myers, Florida, and acid was a big deal and ecstasy was a big deal back in the early 90s. So yeah, I mean, I had access to this stuff. So, I mean, I smoked pot, drank alcohol, ecstasy, acid basically on a daily basis. I was high because that's the only thing I could find that just shut my brain up. Right. I mean, I think we all know that it works temporarily for that. And so the temporary relief turns into temporary every day for 20 plus years. So I turned 16, 17 years old, and I joined the military. I remember a recruiter told me, he was like, he's like, you can go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, or you can go to Vicenza, Italy. And I was like, sign me up, bub. I'm out of here. So at 17 years old, I flew off to Italy to live for the next 5 years. So I spent 17 to 21 living in Europe, And
Very cool.
yeah,
It felt good to get away.
it was a great escape. But man, did it feed my alcoholism. I mean, it was, yeah. I mean, the military taught me a lot of things. It taught me how to shave my face, taught me how to be a leader, taught me how to be a man in most situations, or at least I thought so. But it definitely showed me my propensity to become a raging alcoholic, because it was so socially acceptable. And especially, you know, in Europe, 17, 18, 19, 20, you know, in Italy, if you can sit at the bar, you can, you know, you're servable. And so the drugs stopped, if the alcohol picked up in a way that was just, you know, super heavy. But
so you switched over through the years from acid into booze.
Yeah.
Like,
So
what was the first time you used alcohol?
the day my mom put my dad on a bus to Colorado, it's the day she kicked him out. On the way home from the bus station, she bought a 6-pack of wine coolers, and we drank them together when I got home, when I was 13. And that's the only time she ever did anything like that. She wasn't the type of parent that would do something like that. She, you know, she was a really good mom and did the best she could. But that was the first time I had tasted cognitive numbness, right? That was the first time that I felt anything other than trauma and pain. So yeah, that was it. Well, about 13 years old. Yeah.
You started off really young with everything. Still can't believe acid was the first one. That's pretty heavy duty.
Yeah. And I, you know, and I fell in love with it. So I mean, acid, ecstasy, pot, and alcohol, right? That was everything until I joined the Army. And then when I got in the Army, alcohol was the only option. It's when I got out of the Army after 15 years in the military, which is where we met, by the way. We met in the military. I'm sure you'll get there, but that's when I turned to the opiates and whatnot when I got out. So yeah, that's my short and fuzzy on the beginnings.
Well, yeah, you both had some things you had to go through to get where you are today. That's why I always ask, because most of us, we don't have boring stories. Most of us have a lot of stuff that happened.
Yeah.
So you said you met while you were in the military. How old were you guys when you first met?
20. I was 22.
Yeah, you're 22.
23, because we met in 2011. Yeah, and you were 25, 26.
Was I that young?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
relatively young. That's good.
Yeah.
And where did you guys meet?
Where did we what?
Meet.
Oh, sorry. So Josh had actually, the unit I was assigned to, he had transferred from a different unit.
You were in the military also?
Right. Yeah. That's.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you guys met while, okay.
Yeah.
I thought he was in active duty and he just met you somewhere. So that's cool.
Yeah. So he came to the unit that I was assigned to, a chemical unit, as the new training NCO for the unit, and things kind of, I mean, just picked up. I mean, if you ask him, he'll say that I stalked him, but that's so not what happened.
Yeah. It's so, for people that probably don't know about military stuff. So yeah, I did 5 years in Italy on active duty. And then the last 10 years of my career was as National Guard. So I was in the Ohio Army National Guard, and Courtney was in the Ohio Army National Guard. And so they come in on the weekends and do their training in the 2 weeks in the summer. But during Monday through Friday, there's 3 guys there that work full time, right? There's a training NCO that handles all the training. There's a readiness NCO guy who does all the administrative stuff. And there's a supply guy who does all the logistical stuff. I was the training guy that was there. And so we transferred back and forth to units. So the first weekend that the unit showed up, that's when she showed up. And it happened to be a training exercise where we, you know, packed everything that was green and went out to the woods and did training. And I remember we were in the middle of a place called Muscatatuck, Indiana. It's some hole in the wall, because the Army purchased, you know, any military land is always, well, you got Fort Dix up there, right?
Yeah, for Dixon, New Jersey.
Right. So, usually it's not the best land, right? It's not, coastal waterways and whatnot. So we were in this, basically a shithole in Indiana, and we were training, and I saw her out there putting up a tent, and I just thought, wow, she's, of course, the first thing when you see someone, you don't go, hey, look at the morals and ethics on her, right?
Yeah.
I saw her, and I was like, wow, she's smoking hot, but I had to, I was in E6, so you have to be careful with rank, and so I didn't know her rank. I didn't know anything about her yet. So, but that's where we met. We met in the military. So yeah, we met in the military.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So at that point, when you guys met, were you both in active addiction, or were you on the way there? Or tell me about that. I think you said the first night you met, it was like you guys just went right off
to drinking. We I was definitely drinking all the time. I mean, the only time I didn't drink was when I was at basic for 11 weeks, and that's because you couldn't, but I definitely would have if it would have been available. But yeah, I was drinking. I hadn't gotten into the pain pills quite yet. You know what? I had just started because I had gotten injured at another training site for the military. And so I was sent to this pain doctor who started prescribing Percocets. But at that point, it wasn't something that I had to have, and it was all consuming, and like that's all I thought about. Like I didn't care about anything else at that point, but the alcoholism was definitely hot and heavy.
And as far as I had the previous drug use. When I met her, I was on about a fifth of bourbon a day habit. So I was definitely fully in my alcoholism. And I got diagnosed with PTSD and TBI because I did a tour in Iraq in 03, 04. So when I got home, I had my own traumas from that. So when I met her, at the time, the VA, which is where I still get my health care, the VA was prescribing Percocet for just about anything and everything you could go in and complain about. And so I went in there and got pain pills. So when we met, I was fully addicted to pain pills and fully into my alcoholism when we met. So yeah, definitely.
So tell me how you guys grew together as far as once you met. When did it become serious, and when did you first realize you guys had a problem? Was it one of you figured it out, told the other, or how did that happen?
Well, things moved pretty quickly. Once, we had met, I was actually still married to my first husband at the time, but it was a very, dysfunctional relationship. It was one of those where, like, I went into it already with the intention of knowing that at some point I was going to divorce him, which, that's not very strong footing to start a marriage out with. And, on top of that, he was 23 years older than me. I had serious abandonment issues and daddy issues, of course, if you marry somebody that is that much older than you. He was extremely verbally abusive. He was taking steroids, so it was always like hot and cold, just constant. Anytime I had to go anywhere, whether it be the military or to school for a college class, it was like it was always an interrogation. I was always cheating on him, and which I wasn't at that point. But then it had gotten to the point where he would start getting upset and throwing stuff. Like, he always made sure that, like, if he threw something, it didn't hit me. It was always like right beside me or at my feet. But I already was out the door when I met Josh. It was more like once I met him, he was kind of that final push that I needed to leave my first husband and be like, okay, like enough's enough. I'm done with this. Josh was so amazing, so wonderful. He always has treated me amazing. So I think about within like 2 weeks of us meeting, I moved in with him. So it was.
You guys sound like me and my ex, except we were not meant for each other. But that was part of the problem is we moved so quickly, and I was in a bad spot. I was in the middle of my addiction. I feel bad that I was with her. I mean, I once said to her, she doesn't talk to me anymore, but I was like, you should give this a chance, not to get back to it. We can't be together, but we're co-parents. Because I'm like, Nikki, you've never met me sober.
Right.
Mhm.
When I met you, I was snorting Adderall. Like my idea of being sober was I quit drinking and I started snorting Adderall and Klonopin. That was sober to me. It was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if someone told me that, I'd be like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? You sound like an idiot.
Yeah.
I don't think that's how that works.
idea.
Yeah.
I was hoping she would give this a shot because when you have kids together, a kid is not going to do well when you have two parents that don't talk and they're fighting. When they do talk, they're just not going to do well. Versus mommy and daddy still love each other, or at least give the impression. You know what I mean? You don't have to love me, but make believe.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. That people that stay together, in my opinion, stay together for kids. Yeah, you give that child the worst example of what a relationship is supposed to look like, right?
Exactly. You're better off. We're better off separate.
Yeah. And now, so as far as where I was when I met her, so when I got home from Iraq, I was engaged, and so her and I we had met in middle school. This girl, my ex-wife, we had met in middle school, and then we dated on and off in high school, and then when I deployed to Iraq, we had got engaged, and so when I got home from Iraq in 2003, I had lost a bunch of friends, and a bunch of young guys had gotten killed when I was over there. And so when I got home, I was in such a hurry to live. I was in such a hurry to get married, have kids, buy a house, get the minivan, because I was so afraid of death, right? Because I mean, I saw, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids just end, quite quickly. And so I got married in 2004 when I got home from Iraq to her, and we had a son who is my oldest son, Courtney's stepson now. And we were married for like 5 years. And I look back and I wish she passed away 2 years ago from breast cancer. God rest her soul. I wish I could have apologized to her for the first year that I was married to her, because it was super rough. I was angry as can be. I was just a horrible person. My addiction was fully rising in me.
Watch that word. You weren't a horrible person. You were a sick person at that time.
That's true. That's a great point.
You were real sick.
Yeah, I was super
don't get me wrong. You probably did horrible things. But I don't think it came from the heart. You know,
that's good.
I'm gonna get her. Let me do something horrible. That's a little different.
And you're right. And I'm glad you said that, because words are powerful. Words are powerful.
Yep. Yes, sir.
So her and I got divorced in 2009. So when I met Courtney, and her and I co-parented, and it was a horrible co-parenting experience. She had me in and out of court 121 times in 10 years. So I was in court constantly. But the last couple of years she was alive, we got along a lot better and whatnot. So, but to back up, when I met Courtney, I was full addiction. And I wanted her, I had always prided myself in, like, I've been married before. I know what I want. I know what I don't want. And I had all these illusions and ideas of grandeur, even though I was super sick. And so when I met her, she just honestly she just blew my mind. Like, she was gorgeous. We could talk for hours. And in some part of me too, because I'm, when I check into a meeting, I say, I'm an alcoholic, addict, and now I've added codependent, right? Because I know I've got some really serious codependency issues, and so my whole life, and I think that goes back, not to suck up too much time, but that goes back to nights of waking up when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, and my mom was sleeping on the floor. Right. And my dad is like banging and kicking on the door, and my mom would wake me up, and we would together push the dresser in front of the door together. So, we could hide from him, so he couldn't get in the door. So I had this feeling very young, kind of like Courtney did, but in a different way. I didn't have to raise anybody like she did. But I felt like I had to protect my mom from my dad. So, everything we experience as children, we exude as adults. So when I met her and she explained to me what was going on with her husband, honestly, I think one of the first things I thought was, how can I help? Right? Because that's always been my nature. I want to help everybody. I want to, let's talk about your emotions so I can escape talking about mine. And so when I met her, it moved. It was 2 weeks she moved in. In my brain, I was like, wow, this is so fast. There's no way that, this is crazy fast. But I never felt that way about anybody. And so I just, I was like, hey, I'm just going to go with it. I'd been single for 2.5 years. I had done, Josh for 2.5 years. That was my main goal, is I wanted to find out who I was by myself without being married to somebody. And the other thing too is, she talks about her husband, like on steroids, like this dude was massive, right? He was huge. I mean, like, he was built like a brick shit house. And so when we first met, we would hide her, she would come over to the house, we would hide her truck in the backyard behind the fence. So, because this guy would like drive around and look, look for her around like the area. And we would hide her in her truck.
And he was, from my experience, he probably also had roid rage. I've never met a guy on steroids that didn't have a little bit of that.
Yeah. And Courtney shared that with me a lot, that's majority of the time when he was chucking stuff at her head and feet, he was roid raging, and so, yeah. So 2 weeks. I think what also sped that up was we got pregnant quite quickly. Well, you got pregnant. I didn't.
October.
So we met in
July.
We met in July, and she was pregnant by October, right? So that pretty much shoved the timeline forward quite quickly. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of where we were when we met. As far as your other question about when did we decide we were sick, or who brought it up, I think, when we met each other, she was in college. I had a great job. She had a good job. We were doing really well financially. We were maintaining, right? So it wasn't out of control yet. When we got together, that's when it got stupid. I mean, it got really bad, out of control. That's when cars started getting repoed, evictions started coming. That's when TVs were sold and Xboxes were sold. That's when the true nature of our addiction, I think, really kicked in. Because again, like we said in the beginning, it was like this insane feedback loop where, if she wanted to use, that would reinforce me wanting to use, and then me wanting to get high with her, or her wanting to get high with me, would reinforce it. So it was vicious.
Do you think you were trying to please each other?
I was trying to please. Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah. We weren't, holding each other accountable. We justified what we were doing because we were doing it together.
And I think too, not to interrupt you, when it comes to, are we sick? Do we have a problem? I think Courtney was the first one to say something, because she's very financially smart, very financially in tune. You have to be to keep a $300 a day habit together for close to 10 years. Right.
Wow.
And so I think she was the first one that it started biting. You can speak on that about like the amount of money that was going out. Right. Because at different times, the connections we had, like the first connection might have been her dope man. And that's where we went for a couple of years till something happened. Then we went to my dope man, but she always handled the money, right, in the relationship. I let go of it. She's smarter than I am and most of those things. So I think she was the first one to go, hey, this is costing a lot of money. We just lost our fourth or fifth car.
Yeah.
We weren't paying our rent anymore. We were 48 hours away from being homeless. I mean, with 3 kids or 2 kids and my son co-parenting on the weekend. So it was.
Yeah, I mean, it got to the point where, our lives had become unmanageable. And, there was nothing left to sell or pawn or, nobody left in our lives to manipulate for money so that we could, get our fix and get high. And, we hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it was. We were below rock bottom and it's like, so, okay, something's got to give. Like we had talked about it for years, but it was always something we talked about when we were high. So it was always a good idea, like, oh yeah, we're going to
get all high saying, oh, we should quit, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's over tomorrow after it's over.
Dude, no more, man.
Yeah, it's like that diet, that, I'll start it tomorrow.
Yeah. And here's the really scary part. I now think about is the financial destruction that takes place. So because she's extremely smart and I was extremely manipulative and willing to go to any length to get what I needed. At the time, we lived just south of Nashville, Tennessee. We had moved down there for like a year and a half, 2 years, and we ended up coming back to Ohio. But while we were down there, those cash checking places where you can go and the payday loan places.
Yeah. Yep.
So we would go around and we would go get the highest possible loan we could get, right? And at the time, Courtney still had an extremely well-paying job, still does. But she made enough money with my military retirement together, which is peas, but together was enough to where we could go in and walk in and demand a $5,000 to $7,000 loan and get it that day. And we would do that. And we would get $5,000 from one place. We would drive across the street and go get another 2, 3, 4, $5,000. So within a 6-month period, we'd went to, I think, 5 different check cashing places and pulled out as much money as possible with no intention of paying any of this back. So you're talking like 20, $25,000. And then we would go to banks and we would open up they'd send you an email like, hey, open up a bank account, put 50 in and we'll give you 250, to put in your account. So we would do it. We'd go in and we would give them 50 cash. And then as soon as we opened the account, they put that 50 in there. We'd go home and we would overdraw it by, a couple $100. I mean, there was so many different, we'd go to places, rent-a-centers, and we would go, rent a TV and immediately drive to the pawn shop with it, knowing full well we're attached to that TV for the next year. We just signed a contract. We pawned it immediately. And so the logic, there is no logic. There is no reasoning. I mean, it's just it was obvious, I think, for both of us that things had gotten, like she said, so bad where my family had disowned me and quit talking to me. I had gotten my last $20 from my mom, I guess, sort of say. And so they had disowned me. Nobody wanted anything to do with me. And so the closest people to me were the bad people, and the healthy, loving people, my family, were way out on the outskirts. And it just came to a point for me personally, I think, and I don't speak for Courtney, but I think she might feel the same way as far as our kids are concerned. When I pawned my son's Xbox and he came home from school one day and to play, right, and sit down and, ready and excited to play Xbox, and it wasn't there. Like, that was tough, right? That was like, my son came and asked me, like, what happened to my Xbox? And I lied to him. And it was like, it was soul crushing, but it didn't matter because I had to get high. And I think that for me, when I started seeing that I wasn't being the father that I should be, and that our kids were making meals for themselves, and they weren't taking care. They were taken care of, but they weren't taken care of to the capability for which we were capable of doing. We weren't giving them everything. And so when I personally started feeling that, like they say sometimes in recovery, we don't change behaviors, unless that behavior becomes personally reprehensible to us, right? Doesn't matter what anybody else says, it's when I'm tired of doing it. I think for me, that's when I hit rock bottom. Everything was gone, everything was done. And then my kids kind of looked at me and were like, hey, something's wrong here. It's not right. Plus I signed up, I was a stay-at-home dad at the time, retired from the military. So I felt even more personal about, my job is to raise these kids while she works. And I wasn't doing it. I just wasn't doing it. I wasn't doing my job. And that hit hard. I kind of saw myself and my dad in that. My dad treated me like, garbage, and here I am not giving the same, giving what my children need. So I for me, that, and like Courtney said, the finances, and
yeah, I mean,
what was your rock bottom, Courtney?
Well, for me, I'd always grown up saying like I was never going to turn into my parents. Like that was, always like, I'm not going to be my parents. I'm not going to, do this or that with my kids. I'm going to be, the best mom in the world. And, even to this day, we just hit 4 years in recovery in April.
Congratulations.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
And that is still the things that happened, or that did not happen, as parents, that we should have been doing for our children. Still, I mean, it puts my stomach in knots to think about it. I mean, it's been like the one thing that, I'm trying to forgive myself for, but self-forgiveness is so hard.
It takes time. It takes time.
Yeah. And that is just, I mean, it hits me hard, and I think also, of course, the parents that we weren't being played a role in hitting rock bottom, but yeah. I was tired, I was sick and tired of being sick. And we had gotten so lucky, I guess you could say, in a sense, that we hadn't been arrested. Our kids hadn't been taken away.
Although CPS had been to our house numerous times.
Yeah. Children's Services had been there a couple times.
We had been pulled over by police and
I mean, he had been pulled over with
drugs,
Roxy's 30s in the bill of his hat, in Nashville, and had gotten out of it, and just so many things that had happened. It's like, okay, like our luck is done here. I mean, we had at the point where we had gotten evicted, and we weren't gonna have anywhere to go. And once you start feeling that way, and that there's nowhere else to turn and nobody else to manipulate and nothing else left to sell, and you're just done and tired and of the chase. I mean, the chase was the worst part, chasing down a drug dealer. And it's like, what wouldn't you do to get to your drug dealer and make sure that you could get your fix to get high? And it's like, well, there wasn't anything that we wouldn't do, and that's not okay.
I think if I could point out the mutual rock bottom is we were living in Columbus, Ohio, in Dublin, which is a very expensive place. And we had stopped paying our rent a few months prior. We knew we were getting evicted. We knew we had to get out. We had just enough money to get a rental truck, a U-Haul, and to go find a place to live. And we used the rest of that money to get high. And so we had 48 hours. We hadn't packed a truck yet. We didn't even have a truck yet. We had no place to go, no place to live. And we were driving around, her and I and our kids in the back seat. And they're back there enjoying life and, eating a Happy Meal and just completely oblivious. We're in the front of the car driving around, knowing that we have 48 hours to live. or to live. But it's a movie. 48 hours till we're homeless. And not to mention our credit was so bad from all the stupid stuff we had done over the years, from the cash checking places and the banks. So many people were after us for money that we knew pulling into an apartment complex and asking an apartment manager, to pull our application. And we knew it wasn't going to happen because that day we had gotten turned down, or it was too much money we didn't have. And so with the end of the day coming, we pulled up across the street from this place, this apartment building, and it looked like a retirement home.
Yeah, I thought it was like a nursing home, assisted living. I was like, ah!
And if it was, and at that point, I don't think we would have cared. And I said, look, that place says luxury apartments. It was this 15-story high-rise right off the Ohio State campus. And she's like, there's no way. And I was like, well, let's just try it. We have no other options anyway, right? And we were going to go eat at this Burger King right next door anyway. So for shits and giggles, we'd go in there. They take us upstairs. They show us the apartment. They were gorgeous apartments, eighth floor, overlooking campus or overlooking the opposite direction. It was gorgeous. And we thought there's no way, but we'll try. So we go downstairs and fill out the application. We pay the $25 fee, which we didn't really want to do. And as we were driving away, we thought that was the end of it. So we wake up the next morning, we got 24 hours, we're in bad shape. And this apartment complex calls us like, hey, you're approved. You're approved.
That must have been a great feeling.
I mean, it was like the weight. It was like, it was
almost like, God was like, all right, like this is this last thing I'm doing for you here. Like, what are you gonna do for me? Like, let's get. You were given
one last chance and a gift to help.
Yes.
And that was in 2018, a couple months before we decided to make a call for help. So after a couple months of living in that apartment,
we moved in March, and by April we were
seeking help.
Yeah,
we knew that was,
going into recovery. Yeah.
So
how did you go about getting sober? Did you guys do some type of couples thing? Were you separate?
No, we both of our journeys are very separate.
Very different.
Yeah. We both had self-healing to do, self-forgiveness. It's something that we've both journeyed in, on our own paths. And of course, those paths intersect at sometimes, but we both have our own recovery journeys. If you don't mind.
Yeah, I called, so April 11th, 2018, I called the VA. And I had looked up the number several times of their rehab, their clinics, Suboxone clinics, and all the clinics they have there in mental health, the VA. I had looked it up before. I hadn't done it because I thought it would first off, I thought it would be shit care, because in the past I had gotten shit care from the VA, and they're the ones that had prescribed me this medicine to begin with. So I kind of attached them to my addiction as well. So I called, and the first question I asked was like, if I get accepted into this program, is it going to affect my retirement? Right. That was my first concern, was my money. And they're like, no, not at all. And they were completely different than anybody else in the VA, the mental health section, right? These people understood veterans, they understood, addicts. And the guy was he was kind. He was a listening ear. And it was the first person other than my wife that I had recovered out loud with, that I had told my story. It was the first person I ever told my story to. And he's like, well, Josh, it sounds like you're sick. It sounds like you need help. And he's like, I know we have what you need here. We've dealt with a lot of guys like you. And we have a lot of guys here that, sound like you, look like you've been through what you've been through, and we'd love to have you. And the next day, I drove into the VA and I processed. I started recovery. And so I started going to meetings once a week. And so when I got in there the very first time, as they say, sharing your experience, strength, and hope. I saw guys that were my age that had been through similar things. A lot of people have been through a lot harder things too. And I saw that, these guys are sober. They've been sober for years. They're doing well. Their families are back together. But the funny thing is, I do remember one of the first things I was told, and I don't know, right or wrong, was if you used with your wife, the probability of you two staying together is slim to none.
Yeah,
And
I can only, because like you said, you were just on a feedback loop.
Right. And I know that in all of the years, the decade of addiction that we did together, I know personally, and I can attest to, I know I caused her pain. I know I hurt her. I know I was verbally abusive at times. I never lifted a hand to her, but that doesn't matter. You can gaslight people, verbally abuse them, manipulate them. I was doing everything that I felt necessary to feed my craving and my high, even though she was my wife and the mother of my children. So I caused her a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. And so when I first heard that, I thought, maybe that's the case. Maybe we won't stay together. But I wasn't ready for that, actually, at all. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't want to hear that. And so I never really looked at it like that. I always looked at it like, hey, we use together. We can get clean together too. Right. And so healthy or not, that thought process. So I stuck with the VA for 3 years and I love them. I still have a weekly meeting with one of them. Kristen is she's my social worker from heaven. She's amazing. She's a great person. But honestly, it wasn't until I invited God and Christ into my recovery, that's when things changed for me personally. That's when my recovery, because I got stagnant, right? It's not easy to stop snorting things and shooting things and smoking things and drinking things. But it's a lot easier to not pick up in the morning. It's a lot harder to be emotionally sober, right? You know the drill. It's a lot harder. And so I had gotten stagnant in my recovery. I was like, okay, I'm recovered. I've got, everything's okay right now. And it's comfortable. I feel secure. I'm comfortable. And I was encouraged to take the next step. And when I invited I started using my higher power, my faith, I talked to Courtney about it. It's like, I really want to start a faith journey. I want to go to church again. Like I want to go down this path. And at that time we were in two completely different places. And I'll let her tell you about the beginning of her.
So tell us about yours, Courtney, about your recovery.
Yeah. So I don't have care through the VA. I wasn't on active duty, as they say, long enough. So I had my own personal health insurance through my employer. So I started going to a Suboxone clinic up in Columbus at the same time, pretty much that Josh and I made that decision that it was time to do something. And for probably the first 3 years of while I was in recovery, that's all I really did. I went to my appointment once a month. I got my Suboxone. I went to maybe 1 or 2 meetings, but I just didn't really connect with it, I guess you could say. And they say at least give it 6 weeks at least, before you say if you like the group or not. But I didn't do that. I was brought up very to be very independent, and you don't show weakness, and you need to do, you need to handle your own issues internally. Like you don't talk about them, you don't express them. If there's conflict, you just brush it under the rug and act like it never happened the next day. Like that's how I thought you process emotions. You didn't process them. So at about 3 years of being in recovery, I was seeing Josh go through this amazing journey. Like he had started on his faith journey and was doing his weekly meetings. At that point, I think he was doing them once a month, because he'd been in the program for a while. And I was, seeing him connect with his faith and God. And I got jealous. I was like, I want what you have. So we ended up moving the house that we moved to, which this is, if this isn't the Lord, then I don't know what is. But we ended up moving into the house we're in, and we call them our driveway neighbors. They actually oversee the recovery program at our church
For men and women.
That's great.
Yeah. So Josh started going to, some of the meetings, and I don't think it was very long after that, I mustered up the courage and walked over there, and, I got more information about it and ended up going as well. And, they're our driveway neighbors are both of our sponsors now. And
That's great.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to tell that story even more extraordinary, my ex-wife passed away in September of 2020.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Thanks. And we had shared my oldest son, our 13-year-old, and she died when he was 11. And when we were living in Columbus, it was just me, Courtney, and our two younger kids that we had together. And we got a call one day, not one day, when we knew she had beat cancer, and then all of a sudden it metastasized, and she went within 48 hours. And it was really, really tough. Now, the onus was, I have a kid with her. So now I'm going from a part-time dad to now there's some custody stuff that needs to get talked about. We were in Columbus. They were in Centerville, Ohio, about an hour and 15-minute separation via car. And so the decision came down to, we need to move. He just lost his mom at 11 years old. He was broken, completely broken, kind of still is. And we didn't want to move him to Columbus. We didn't want to take him out of his social environment. We want to take him out of his school. His grandparents are here, which are a massive part of his life. So her and I decided we were going to move here to where we are right now. And so she went down kind of first to find a place to live. And we had to find a house that had the bedrooms we need and the bathrooms, but it had to be within this specific school zone, within the specific city. Right. So it was already a limited option thing. There were only 2 homes available in the entire city that met this criteria for me to get custody of them. One of them was this house. The other one, I think, were owned by the same people too, or
No, it was
but it was junk.
Yeah.
It was junk. So this house was the only option. Long story short, it cost about 15 grand for us to buy out of our apartment lease up in Columbus. 2 grand for the truck, and 3,500, 4 grand to, first and last and security deposit for this house, right? Here's the interesting part. 6 months before my ex-wife passed away, I had finally made amends to my mother and my stepdad and my sister, right? I hadn't spoken to them in 6 or 7 years. They hadn't seen our kids in 6 or 7 years. I had just made amends with them. I remember calling my mom. Our relationship had just finally picked back up after 6 months. And we were talking about my ex-wife's death. We were and talking about how, we need to move, but it's going to cost $15,000 to $16,000. And I was talking to her about how I'm about to have a conversation with my 11-year-old son to let him know that as much as I want to be there for him, it's going to be about 1.5 years, 2 years until we can move down there, because we just can't afford it. And you're going to have to live with your grandparents until then. So from his mom's to his grandparents and then to us, I mean, just a lot of movement. And I remember my mom saying, "How much do you need?" And this was a woman who I had stolen from, who I had manipulated. I mean, just all the normal stuff that happens. I steamrolled her. I ran over her and I drained her dry, and we had no relationship at all. And she asked me that, and I told her how much it was. And we kept talking, and then I remember her texting me about an hour later and was like, "Hey, your dad, my stepdad, Tom, we want to fund your move, and we're going to give you the money." And it wasn't a loan. It was take this money from us. And it was what, how much was it? Like 15, I think it was 15,000,
Yeah.
10,
Yeah.
10, about 10 grand, 10 grand.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And this coming from someone who I just made amends from, who so it was like, we got, I made amends, thank God to the program, right? The program, the 12-step program, the, recovery, I made amends. If I wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't have had the money to move where we are. And if we wouldn't have had the money to move where we are, we wouldn't be in this house. And when we get in this house, we happen to move in across the street from two people, a husband and wife, who've been married and both in recovery for 30 plus years. The guy, he runs the men's recovery for the entire church, and she runs the women's recovery for the entire church. And we happen to move across the street from these people. And long story short, I meet him first. We get to talking. I felt compelled to tell him I was in recovery, and he felt compelled to tell me that he's got options for me. And we were already looking for a church anyway. So we started going to that church, started going to meetings. About a month or two later, I asked him to be my sponsor. He accepted. And then with a little bit of time after that, like Courtney said, she asked his wife to be her sponsor. So now, to me, he's like a father figure, spiritual advisor, sponsor. I mean, the sponsor relationship is incredible. But just for all that to happen, to live across the street from people like that, the people we needed most in our lives at that time just happened to be right there. And so for me, that's, that's God telling me, hey, you're in the right place, you're doing the right thing, and I'm going to put the right people in your path that you need right now. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's still, even to this day, I mean, we've been here almost 2 years now, and I still get emotional thinking about, how we ended up where we're at, and, having them, as our neighbors. I mean, it's
incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah. So yeah, that's the where, so now as far as where we're at in recovery, we go to meetings separately. We also go to some meetings together. We do an ACA meeting together, the adult children of alcoholics, dysfunctional families.
Okay. Yeah.
So that uses the 12-step plus talks about, inner child and the things that happen to us as kids, and why we are the way we are. And so we do it separately. We do it together. I just started. I'm a sponsor now, so now I sponsor. I have a sponsee in AA. We're in training to be mentors. We're to be marriage mentors. So anybody that comes to our church that wants to get married at our church, they have to go through marriage counseling before they get married, basically. Premarital counseling. And so we'll be the couple that some of them sit down with and get mentored by before they get married. So to go from this completely unhealthy addiction bomb of a family, where, we're just in a dire straits and bad places, to now, where we're at. I mean, it's got to be a higher power, right? Because the best that I could do personally, got me to drugs and alcohol. That's the best I could do. That was my one shot I had, led me to drugs and alcohol. And to go from that to where I am now, I mean, it's for me, it's my, you can probably tell by what I'm wearing. I mean, that's my higher power. Because for me, it was all about surrendering, right? I've always thought I could control everything. It was as soon as I surrendered to my higher power and handed it over and started working the 12 steps, that to me, that even though I'd already been sober for 3.5 years, that's what saved my life was a 12-step program.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is a spiritual program, but I'm agnostic. So I'm in the middle. I just don't know. But yeah, I think if you are religious, it helps you with the program. Because I mean, in 7 out of the 12 steps, they mention God. And that's okay. It was written in the 1930s, and it was the best they could come up with.
Yeah.
But I think religion's a beautiful thing. Because the one thing I always say is all religions are alike in regards to be a good person, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't murder, etc. You know what I mean? So they all kind of they're all guidelines of just how to be a good person.
Yes.
So, and then there comes step 12, being a good person and giving back what you've been given so freely. You know, we have our own 10 steps for Addicts Anonymous, but I love AA. I've read the book a couple of times. I think because the thing that's cool about them, they were the first self-help group for addicts, period, dot, the end. That did not exist before them. So this guy was a real innovator in what he did. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
To be the one guy who says, I think I can help alcoholics, you gotta be a little cocky, but you also gotta be someone that dedicated.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And especially at that time period to take something on like that.
Oh yeah, because it was very, very stigmatized.
Yeah, I mean, we're, you know, to want to spend your life dealing with the deplorables, the gutter people. It's kind of like what speaking of step 12, like what you're doing with this podcast. I mean, you can tell you've got an emotional response. I'm probably, after we hang up, I'll probably cry like a small child. But I mean, so this has been extremely healthy. You know, you're giving us a platform, but you're also allowing other people to hear this. So that's, experience, sharing experience, strength, and hope. But you're able to reach people, on a much larger level, much higher output than any single one person. So I just wanted to say, I love what you're doing. I love this. I think this is great. I really, because, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of podcasts out there, right? There's tons of podcasts, but most of them, you have somebody talking at you, and you right. And you have someone teaching you, and they're good, right? But you never have someone like you, who's a guy who also is in recovery, talking. It's like sitting in on a meeting, right? And
exactly like a speaker meeting. That's the way I kind of saw it. Was I don't have to do much. I mean, obviously I've learned the art of interviewing and asking the right questions, but I don't really have to do much. Like, you guys are great storytellers. For some reason, I've noticed that about addicts. We're great storytellers.
Yeah.
For some reason, we all know how to tell our story. It's very rare that I mean, every now and then I do have a person that you got to kind of pull the story out of them, but most people are very good storytellers.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you thanking me for doing this. I just want to, just like you want to give back, I want to give back. This is one of the best ways I could think how.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So that's all I have.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So my last question that I ask everyone is, do you guys have any advice, whether it be just for single people or for couples?
Whew. That is a phenomenal question.
I mean, I don't know if you would call it advice, but I can tell you, some of the things that have helped me and keep me going.
Let's hear it.
It's, in the rooms and through the program, I've learned so much, about myself and others as well. And, I've been trying to work on, this emotional sobriety, and which was foreign to me. I didn't know that that was even something that you worked on. So, exploring that and the concept of, self-forgiveness, it's that's kind of the hurdle I'm trying to tackle right now, is forgiving myself, because I have so much shame, from my past. So I'm trying to, go through all of the things that have made me who I am, and taking accountability for what, I contributed to, and forgiving people that need to be forgiven. And there's been, some relationships, for example, with my mother, that I've had to, detach from her with love and begin to set boundaries, because I was still being manipulated by her and cowering, to anything she said or did. I went right back to being, that 10-year-old little girl that was being manipulated and used, and, didn't know where I had fit into this world. So I've been processing all that, and, it's been extremely hard, but it's also helped me to, start this emotional sobriety journey on top of, my recovery with drugs and alcohol. And I'm learning to name my feelings and express them, which is, that's a foreign concept to me. I never, spoke about anything that was going on with me, and that was also my codependency. Like I wanted to make sure that everybody else was taken care of and their needs and wants were met with no consideration to my own. So I would definitely say, just, forgive yourself, like I've had to, Josh always said, God's forgiven us for our past. Why haven't you? So that's been, something that's been in the back of my mind every time, I start to be critical of myself, or, that I should have done this differently, or I'm punishing myself for things that I had no control over. So, definitely, I would say it's healthy and okay to, like I said, detach with love and set boundaries. And for me, I'm with like my relationship with my mother or relationships from the past, I'm no longer a child without choices. I can make my own decisions. I can choose who I allow into my life, and, and the people that aren't fulfilling my life and bringing me joy and happiness and are just dragging me down. I don't have to allow them to be, a part of my family, my life, my world.
Yep.
And that's been hard too. It's hard, but yeah, that's some things that have helped me along the way, and maybe they'll help someone else.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate you sharing that. For me, if whether you're led by faith or you're digging into the chapter for the agnostics, one, you're not alone. You're not even remotely alone. Two, self can't heal self. This can't be done alone. This can't be managed alone. This can't be fought alone. This takes a sisterhood or a brotherhood. This takes a meeting. And I think one of the first things I realized is I hated myself. I had no love for myself whatsoever. And I would get my validation and my affirmations and my self-worth from others. And it wasn't until I got into the rooms, into the meetings and picking up literature and going on my journey, to where I realized that people in recovery, even if it's your first meeting, they love you. They're excited you're there because you're one of them, and you have this undeniable bond and tie that can be broken. So there's people out there you can heal with. My advice is to sit in gratitude and acceptance. The two most important things for me to understand and realize is that yesterday is gone. It's dead. It's all over, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And tomorrow, as much as we think that we have this illusion of control, we just don't. We have no idea what tomorrow brings. So if we can't touch yesterday and we can't affect tomorrow, then today is all there is. I mean, that's it. And we might not do well today as we did yesterday, and tomorrow we might not do as well as we do today, but that's all we have. There's literally nothing else. Today is it. Live for today. Don't assign value to what other people think of you. You have extreme value and worth, whether you get that from God or whether you get that from some other place. You're worth this. You're worth every step, every minute, every meeting. And I think lastly, finding people that are like you, that are willing to recover out loud. Like this podcast, I listen to a lot of people beforehand. I listen to a bunch of episodes, and I'm going to continue to listen to all of them, because hearing other people's stories tells me that I'm not some piece of crap. I'm human. I'm flawed. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to meet people's expectations. I am not going to, there's so many things I'm not going to do. I'm going to fail every single day, but that's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to not be perfect. And, just keep worrying about you. I'm sure everybody's heard this, but the program is a very selfish program. In the first, year or so, because you can't give others what you don't have. If you don't love yourself, you can't love others. It's impossible. So if you want it, you got to give it away. And I know that might not make sense to some people, but if you want to be loved and if you want to be loved, you got to give love away. If you want to be trustworthy, you've got to give trust to people. Listen to these podcasts, listen to the stories, and you'll find your home there. You'll find your hope. You'll listen to experience, and you'll get strength from it. That's what we're trying to do. One day at a time. That's all there is. One day.
Yep. And, if you chase your recovery, half as much as you used to chase your drug dealer down to get high and get your fix, then I'd say you're doing all right.
You're in good shape. Yeah, definitely.
Well, this has been great. I really just want to say thank you to both of you. This has been an exceptional interview, I think.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for giving us a platform. Thanks for listening to us and hearing us. And I can't say it enough. We really appreciate what you're doing here. This is a big deal.
Thank you. I'm going to continue on as long as I can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So for everyone watching and listening, if you like what you heard and saw, go below, give us a like. Also subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Reddit. Go to our Facebook group. You'll see under our events tab that we do nightly Zoom meetings every night at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. So that's all I have for today. And until next time.